She boarded the plane, expecting nothing more than a routine trip, but when a flight attendant dropped a single photograph, it stopped her heart cold. The girl in the picture wore the exact dress her daughter had been wearing the day she vanished, 29 years ago. Coincidence, or the moment the past finally came crashing into the present? If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where you are watching from. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Now, let's jump into the story. Clara Benson settled into her window seat on Flight 325 from New York to Phoenix, the hum of the engines filling the cabin. She had made this trip many times before, always telling friends it was to visit her son Michael. But deep inside, each journey carried a quiet hope that fate might finally place her face to face with the daughter she had lost 29 years ago. Rose had vanished from their family garden one warm September morning, wearing her favorite red and white polka dot dress and holding the rag doll Clara had sewn for her. The years since had been filled with endless searches, false leads, and nights when sleep refused to come. At 61, Clara's auburn hair had turned silver at the edges, but the ache in her heart had never faded. The first-class cabin bustled with the usual pre-flight activity. Business travelers typed quickly on laptops, tourists flipped through guidebooks, and attendants moved through the aisle with practiced efficiency. Clara glanced out at the tarmac, lost in memories of Rose's bright smile and the way her small hands had clutched that doll during bedtime stories. "Ma'am, may I get you something to drink before takeoff?" The voice was gentle, carrying a soft southern lilt. Clara looked up to see a tall young woman with warm brown eyes and a neat blonde bun. Her name tag read Melanie Hart. "Just water, please," Clara replied, studying the woman's face. There was something oddly familiar in her expression, though Clara couldn't place it. As Melanie poured the water, a strand of hair shifted, revealing a faint crescent-shaped scar just above her left temple. Clara's breath caught. Rose had fallen from a swing when she was 3, leaving an identical mark in that exact spot. Clara's fingers tightened around her armrest. Melanie noticed the hesitation. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" "Yes," Clara said quickly, forcing a small smile. "Just tired from the early start." The plane taxied down the runway and lifted into the clear morning sky. Clara tried to shake the thought from her mind. Scars were common. Coincidences happened. Still, her gaze followed Melanie each time she moved through the cabin, watching her graceful stride and the easy kindness in her interactions with passengers. Half an hour into the flight, turbulence struck without warning. The seatbelt sign chimed, and the plane jolted sharply. Passengers gasped. Some gripping armrests. Melanie had been serving drinks in the aisle when the movement caused her service tray to tilt. A small black shoulder bag tumbled from the overhead bin above her, scattering its contents. Clara instinctively unbuckled her seatbelt to help. She knelt, collecting a lipstick, a charger, loose coins, and then her hand closed around a small, worn photograph. Time seemed to freeze. The picture showed a little girl, no more than 4 years old, in a red dress with white polka dots. In her arms was a handmade rag doll with button eyes and tiny fabric wings. Clara knew every stitch of that doll. She had called it Miss Butterfly. Her eyes locked on Melanie's. "Where did you get this picture?" "It's just an old family photo," Melanie replied, glancing toward the other passengers. "We should both sit down until the turbulence passes." Melanie's face paled. "That's me when I was little. My mother took that photo." She hesitated, then added quietly, "She found me when I was about 4, at a bus station in Santa Fe. I was holding that doll in a picture. I kept repeating an address, but I don't remember it now." Clara's heart pounded. "What address?" Melanie looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "Elmwood Lane, number 12, I think. Does that mean something to you?" Clara's breath caught again. Elmwood Lane had been their street. The plane steadied, but inside Clara, the storm was just beginning. She sank back into her seat, clutching the photograph. Too many details matched: the scar, the doll, the dress, the address. Across the aisle, Melanie stood frozen, her hands tightening on the bag, her mind racing. She had lived her whole life as Melanie Hart. Now, a stranger on a plane was looking at her as if she had known her since birth. As Flight 325 continued toward Phoenix, both women sat in silence, each gripped by an unshakable feeling that everything they thought they knew was about to change. 29 years earlier, the streets of Savannah were quiet under the fading light of late summer. Clara Benson had trusted Harold Quinn for years. He was their family's driver, a man who knew their routines, their habits, and their children. But what Clara didn't know was that Harold carried a secret, one that would shatter her family forever. Harold was drowning in debt to a man named Vito Lorenzo, a figure known in whispers and shadows. Vito was ruthless, and when Harold failed to pay, he offered something else in return. It was the kind of decision that comes in a moment, but ruins a lifetime. One September morning, Clara kissed her 4-year-old daughter Rose goodbye in the garden, thinking Harold was driving her to a neighbor's house for a playdate. Instead, he steered the car toward the edge of the city. Rose sat in the back, humming to herself, clutching the rag doll Clara had sewn. At a small bus station far from home, Harold led Rose inside. His voice was low and hurried when he spoke to a woman behind the counter, pressing a folded piece of paper into her hand. It carried a few dollars and a note with a name and no return address. Harold left without looking back. That afternoon, a schoolteacher named Nora Hart stopped at the station on her way home. She noticed a small girl sitting alone on a bench, her legs swinging, eyes fixed on the floor. The child was wearing a red and white dress and holding a doll with button eyes. Nora asked where her parents were, but the girl could only repeat Elmwood Lane, number 12. Nora reported the child to the local authorities, but with no missing person alert matching the description in their system, and no solid leads, the case stalled. Afraid the girl would disappear into the foster system, Nora took her home. She named her Melanie and raised her as her own. In the present day, Melanie Hart sat in the living room of her Santa Fe home, staring at the old photograph she had found again after the flight. The conversation with Clara replayed in her mind, each detail like a puzzle piece that had been missing her entire life. Nora, now in her 70s, entered the room carrying 2 cups of tea. "You've been quiet since you got back from Phoenix," she said gently. Melanie looked up. "Mom, I need to know the truth. Where did you find me?" Nora's hands trembled slightly as she set the cups down. She took a deep breath. "You were at the bus station. You had that little doll and a note with an address. I called the police, but nothing matched in their files. I kept you because I was afraid that whoever left you there might come back. I didn't know who they were, but I knew they weren't safe." Melanie felt her chest tighten. "Did you ever try to find out?" "I tried," Nora said softly. "But every time I asked questions, people warned me to stop. There was talk of a man named Vito Lorenzo. He was dangerous, and I didn't want to risk losing you to him, or to a life you couldn't escape." Melanie sat back, her mind turning. She had always believed she was simply abandoned. Now she understood. She had been taken. And there was a family, a mother, who might have been searching for her all these years. Across the country, in Phoenix, Clara called her son Michael. She told him about Melanie, the scar, the dress, the doll. Michael listened carefully, his voice calm, but his words measured. "Mom, I think you might be right, but before we believe it, we need proof." Unbeknownst to Clara, Michael had already been searching for years. He had hoped to find Rose, living a safe and happy life, so that his mother could let go of the ache that had consumed her. He agreed to hire a private investigator named Paul Denver, a man known for finding answers in cold cases. Within days, Paul traced a bus ticket purchased by Harold Quinn to Santa Fe on the day Rose vanished. While these threads began to weave together, Melanie sat in her room, holding the doll. The stitching was loose now, and one of the button eyes was barely hanging on. But it wasn't the doll that made her hands shake. It was the feeling that the life she had always known might have been built on someone else's pain. She didn't yet know what would come next, but she understood one thing with absolute clarity. The past was no longer behind her. It was walking right toward her, and soon it would be standing in the same room. Clara Benson sat at her kitchen table in Phoenix, the early evening light spilling through the blinds. The photograph of the little girl in the red and white dress lay in front of her, the edges worn from being held so tightly. She had stared at it for hours, her mind caught between hope and fear. Could Melanie really be Rose? Could the search that had defined her life be coming to an end? Michael arrived with a determined look on his face. He set his laptop on the table and opened a file. "Mom," he began, "Paul Denver's found something." Clara leaned forward, her heart pounding. Michael continued, "On the day Rose disappeared, Harold Quinn bought a bus ticket from Savannah to Santa Fe. It was paid for in cash, but the clerk remembered a man traveling with a small girl. She matched Rose's description exactly." Clara's throat tightened. "That's proof, Michael. It has to be her." "It's close," Michael said carefully, "but we still need something undeniable. Paul says the fastest way is a DNA test, while in Santa Fe." Melanie sat across from her fiancé, Thomas Reed. He had been listening quietly as she explained the events on the flight and Nora's confession. Thomas reached into a drawer and pulled out an old leather journal. "I think you should see this," he said. Melanie opened it, flipping through pages filled with neat handwriting. She stopped when she saw Harold Quinn's name. "My father wrote this," Thomas explained. "He passed away years ago, but before he died, he told me there were things in here I might not understand until later. This entry says he once helped a man named Harold relocate a child. He doesn't give details, but it sounds like the same time you appeared in Santa Fe." Melanie's hands shook. "Are you saying your family knew?" "Not exactly," Thomas said quickly. "He never told me more, but I think he was involved in keeping you hidden." The revelation cut deep. Melanie felt a wave of confusion, betrayal, and sadness. Her life seemed to be unraveling, thread by thread, revealing truths she had never imagined. Determined to know for certain, Melanie contacted Michael through Paul. Arrangements were made for a DNA test, each side agreeing to wait for the results before taking the next step. When the results came in, there was no doubt. The test showed a 99.9% match between Melanie Hart and Clara Benson. Melanie was Rose. The moment Clara read the confirmation, tears streamed down her face. She pressed her hands to her mouth, overwhelmed by the reality that the search was over. Yet she also knew this was only the beginning. Melanie's reaction was more complicated. The truth was undeniable, but so was her loyalty to Nora. She had been raised with love, protected from harm, and given a life she valued. Walking away from that was unthinkable. "If I'm going to meet her," Melanie told Paul, "Nora comes with me. She's my mother too." When Paul relayed this to Clara, she didn't hesitate. "Of course," she said. "If Nora kept her safe all these years, I owe her everything." Preparations began for the meeting. Clara imagined holding Rose again, hearing her voice, and filling the gaps of nearly 3 decades apart. Michael handled the logistics, ensuring privacy so the moment wouldn't be disturbed. As the day approached, Melanie felt her emotions twist in every direction. She remembered the faint flickers of her early life before Santa Fe. Flashes of a garden, the smell of bread baking, a woman's voice calling her name. Now. She knew that voice belonged to Clara. Nora stayed close, offering calm reassurance. "Whatever happens, I'm right here," she said. Melanie nodded, holding her hand tightly. In Phoenix, Clara placed fresh flowers in a small garden by her home, the same type she had once grown outside their house on Elmwood Lane. She wanted the first meeting to happen there, where beauty and peace could surround them. For years, the truth had been hidden in shadows, in bus station corners, in whispered warnings, in locked drawers and old journals. But now it stood in the light, undeniable and unshaken. Clara, Melanie, and Nora were all about to step into that light together, each carrying the weight of the past and the fragile hope of the future. And as the sun dipped low over Phoenix, the air was thick with the feeling that everything was about to change again, not with the shock of discovery this time, but with the possibility of healing. The garden in Clara Benson's backyard was quiet, filled with the gentle scent of lavender and roses. A small stone path curved toward a wooden bench under a flowering tree. Clara had chosen this place for the meeting because she wanted it to feel safe and calm. For years, she had imagined the moment she would see her daughter again. Now, that moment had arrived. Melanie Hart stepped through the gate with Nora by her side. Her hands trembled slightly, but her posture stayed firm. The sunlight caught her hair, and for a second, Clara saw the little girl she had lost so long ago. Michael stood nearby, ready to give them space. Clara walked forward slowly. "Rose," she said softly, her voice breaking. Melanie stopped. The name felt both foreign and familiar. She looked into Clara's eyes, seeing the same deep warmth she had glimpsed on the plane. "I guess that's me," she whispered. They moved toward each other and embraced. For a moment, neither spoke. The years of separation, the questions, and the pain seemed to pour out in that silent hug. When they finally stepped back, Clara reached for Nora's hand. "Thank you," Clara said sincerely. "You saved her. You raised her. You gave her what I couldn't." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted her to be safe. I never wanted to take her from you." They sat together on the bench, talking quietly. Melanie listened as Clara shared memories from before she disappeared, her favorite bedtime stories, the songs they used to sing, the way she would laugh when chasing fireflies in the garden. Melanie told stories of her own, about growing up in Santa Fe, about the things she loved and the dreams she carried. Michael joined them, offering old family photos. Melanie studied each one, recognizing pieces of herself in the faces and places she saw. For the first time, she felt connected to two worlds that had always seemed far apart. In the weeks that followed, they met often. Melanie learned about her father, who had passed away years earlier. She visited Elmwood Lane and saw the garden where she had last played as a child. The visits were emotional, but they brought a sense of peace she hadn't expected. Inspired by what they had been through, Melanie and her fiancé Thomas began discussing how they could help others. Together with Clara, Michael, and Nora, they founded the Nora Benson Foundation, a safe space for children who were in transition, those moving between foster homes, those separated from family, and those in need of care during uncertain times. One afternoon, a little girl arrived at the foundation. She was quiet, clutching a worn teddy bear, her eyes full of uncertainty. Melanie knelt down to greet her. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm Melanie. Do you want to come see the garden?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. Melanie led her to the pond, where the fish swam lazily under the sunlight. "We can feed them if you'd like," she offered. The girl's face softened as she dropped food into the water, watching the ripples spread. In that moment, Melanie felt the weight of her own journey. She remembered being the child in the bus station, unsure and alone, until someone reached out a hand. Now, she was that person for someone else. As the years passed, the foundation grew, touching countless lives. Clara often said that love doesn't just close circles, it widens them, making room for new connections and new beginnings. Melanie understood that now more than ever. Our story had begun with loss, but it had not ended there. It had expanded into something richer, something that reached far beyond her own life. And in the quiet garden where it all began, the circle kept widening.